Hello world and welcome to episode 15 of The Top Split, also known as Splash and Dash 3. I'm your host Alex McKellar and joining me once again is my co-host Alex John aka The Doctor. Welcome back for another stint, AJ.
Thanks for having me.
I'll call you The Doctor of course because folks, AJ just recently completed his PhD at uni in the field of advanced robotics, wasn't it AJ?
Something like that, yeah. Veterinary science, dairy cows, robots, all sorts of weird, fancy, wonderful things.
Awesome. If you'd only done this earlier, though, mate, the name of this format of the podcast, instead of being Splash and Dash, it could have been McBeardface and the Doctor. Maybe.
Oh, well, hindsight.
Yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Seriously, though, AJ, congratulations, mate. That's a massive achievement. Really well done.
Yeah, thank you. It feels good, and I'm looking forward to whatever's next.
Fantastic. All right. Well, what's next on the agenda for today's episode? Of course, what have we got? We've got a bit of tech talk today, but first, the much lauded end of season update, the new cars and tracks. AJ, what are your initial impressions? Where do we start?
Yeah, well, I think we should start with the cars because they're probably the biggest additions to iRacing with the build, and arguably there's some pretty decent entries. We were talking about them last podcast, wondering how they'd fit in, and I don't know about you, but I've had a drive of both of them, and I've got a bit of an idea of what I think of both of them now.
Yeah, what are the first impressions?
F3 is interesting, very pro Mazda like, I'd say, and then you jump up to the Renault 3.5, and I absolutely love that car. I can see myself racing the official series in the V8 powered 3.5 for sure.
Yeah, nice. I drove both as well. I hopped in the Renault 3.5 first at Silverstone. It was on day one at week 13. Really good combo, I thought. It's a powerful open wheeler as we expected. It's a nice little bit of techie stuff to keep you interested in there as well, with a unique DRS system and launch control, or at least a cut down flavour of it. The setup I drove felt stable and I've got to say almost sluggish in terms of its turnings at times compared to what I'm used to in other open wheelers. Having said that, it was also pretty quick to bite you if you stepped out of line, AJ.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I tried the both on the baseline setup just to see how they were included in the sim in vanilla form, so to speak. And I felt that the 3.5, the Renault 3.5, was pretty tame. I didn't have too much trouble with that actually. Reminded me a little bit of the Williams F1 car that we no longer run, but very sort of on train tracks, if you could say. Of course, if you did open the loud pedal a little bit too soon in the corner, then it would bite you. But I found it was pretty predictable and nothing too scary. And yeah, interesting with the new DRS. I'll be interested to see how that works. I haven't had a chance to race it yet, so I don't know what it's going to be like in a pack. Are we going to have trouble following cars with a higher downforce? But echoing back to what you said, though, I was also surprised with this being touted as a really high downforce car that I also felt that it was a little bit sluggish. It certainly doesn't have the level of nimbleness as an F1 car does, and I thought that it would be a little bit more nimble than it was, at least on baseline setup.
Yeah, I agree. I did find though, as you say, let it go with the loud pedal, of course. But it reminded me of the first time I drove a car with slick on iRacing, at least with slick tyres. And I've got a mate who's done a lot of real world racing. And I used to talk to him about, we would compare notes between his real experience and my pretend experience, we used to say. But the first time I hopped in a car with slicks on iRacing, I noted that the change in grip levels, obviously, and how much nicer it was to drive. I also felt like that it had, obviously, a ton of grip until it didn't, and the car started to spin. It was sort of, with the FR 3.5, I was reminded of that in so much as it felt to me like you could push them right up to the limit and feel safe, right up to the limit of that grip. But the slightest bit over and, it was fourth pedal or death, AJ.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I had the complete opposite experience. I found that the Formula Renault, I was able to catch slides. I wouldn't say fairly easily, but I was certainly catching a lot more slides in the Formula Renault than I was in the new Dallara F3. That is for sure.
Yeah, well, onto the F3. I don't know about you, mate, but I'm really liking this car. It's punchy and lively, and I'm finding it really fun to drive. I see it, as you say, more like the Pro Mazda than the Renault 2.0, which is a plus in my books. It does look to be the more popular of the new cars. Obviously, it's a license category down, so that's going to limit the numbers to some extent. I did note, I just as a little comparison, I took note that the first F3 race of the season had 66 drivers sign up. The top split strength of field was just over 3,000. Compared to just 26 drivers and a 2.5k soft in the FR 3.5. And just for a further comparison, the first Skippy race had 97 drivers sign up and a top split strength of field of 2.8k. So it's just sort of in between, more drivers, but the strength of field just in between the two. And that was just an hour after the F3 race. So, look, obviously there's going to be a lot of interest in the two new cars. I was a bit surprised at the big difference between the F3 participation and the 3.5 participation, albeit a very small sample, but maybe an indicator of what's to come, AJ.
Yeah, well, I guess the Formula 3 being that I'd say lower tier car. Well, it is a lower tier car.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, obviously, I guess you will get more, more guys jumping in. The same in the same vein as the Skippy. It's one of those cars where the lower power, a little bit lower aero. I think it actually lends itself to really good racing. And so, yeah, if we can get splits of that size, then yeah, it's just going to be absolutely brilliant for the racing. But it'll be interesting to see though how long that persists. But I can say with the two cars, or sorry, with the Pro Mazda and the F3 feeling so similar, and I had a look at the Pro Mazda results so far, and not a single race is split. If you're an Australian and you want to race the Pro Mazda, then I'd say don't bother because really no races have gone official yet um, in sort of our prime time zone. And the rest have had about a dozen people in the races. So certainly, it's an interesting call putting the F3 and the Pro Mazda both in at sea level, given that we now know that the F3 drives so similar to a Pro Mazda.
Yeah, look, regardless, those initial figures that we were talking about, really positive numbers for the open wheeler community on the surface of it. But as you say, there's the kicker, right? I talked about the numbers in those first of the other races of the other categories. The first Pro Mazda race of the season, 8 drivers. 1,500 strength of
Yeah,
field, and this was at the same time, the very same time I should say, as the Formula Renault 2.0 race, which only had 14 drivers and 1,150 strength of field. Like it's well, we knew there'd be the tide would rush in with the new cars. The question is, what happens when it rushes out? I guess, AJ.
yeah. And I mean, I'm not too. I mean, you may be a little sad with the Pro Mazda going, but yeah, no, I'm not too worried. I mean, we sort of know this is going to happen, and it's an older car, and I think it'd be all right for it to go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I mean, I've banged on about this sort of stuff for the last few weeks. And there's one more element to add to this, and I hinted at it previously, the timing of the races. The FR 2.0 is now not only a D class car in direct competition with the Skip Barber category, its races are now every 2 hours, like before, but now they are on at the exact same time as Pro Mazda races, rather than offset by an hour as they were in previous seasons. So you can race one or the other, not both? Why run them both at the same time?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's difficult. They've got enough, fair selection of Formula cars to choose from now. So I guess there's going to be clashes, but yeah, moving the Formula Renault to Formula Renault 2.0 to D class, I think that's a good move. And I drove that car back to back with the other new open wheelers, and the time differences weren't that massive between the F3 and the Formula Renault 2.0, but they definitely feel like very different cars. You can definitely sense there's much less grip in the Formula Renault, and I have to say it's a good car to have in D class now because it's quite a friendly car to drive as well. Um, with it being an older car, I don't know if the participation's going to maybe pick up. Being D class, hopefully it will. I think that car, in amongst with the Skippy as well, it would be a really good starter car, especially for someone learning to drive something with a little bit more downforce than the Skippy.
Yeah, potentially. It wasn't certainly my preferred of the two cars, that and the Pro Mazda when they were running. But interestingly, speaking of schedules, the F3 now runs every 2 hours as well. But when it runs at the exact same start time as the Skip Barber race for that hour. I mean, what's going on there? I mean, it does mean that potentially you could go from one to the other relatively easily because skippies are every hour and the F3s every other hour. But does the Skippy suffer in this case too? Look, initial indications would suggest no. I mean, we've seen as many as 6 splits for Skip Barber races in the first 2 days. 4 splits frequently, the odd 5 here and there and a 6. As I said, I mean, it does benefit from the fact that it is round one. It is at Lime Rock Park, so free track, very familiar to those who've just got out of rookies into D class. But the scheduling, I guess, I'll be honest with you, it's kind of good in some respects in my mind because I remember when I was streaming previously, I'd like to race skippies, but at the end of the skippies, it was always a struggle to find something that I wanted to race that sort of backed up onto it or was easily sort of hopping from one to the other because I love the open wheelers. But now I guess that might be a bit easier to have a bit more variety in there, but well, I'll be interested to see how it plays out and whether it, unites some categories in the open wheels or divides them, AJ.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be too worried about the Skippies going away. I think the Skippy is like a weed, and you will never be able to kill the Skippy series unless you take it away for good. I think there's always going to be Skippy races out there, and you'll hear them as well because they're very vocal. Um, but yeah, no, I think it's a good problem they have too many races to choose from, and I mean personally, I'll probably try and pick one to sort of go as my main category, and then juggle around between the other 3 or 4 open wheelers and give those a crack if they're available at the time. I reckon.
Yeah, you're right. We're spoiled for choice. I do worry about the Pro Mazda, as you said, and to a lesser extent the Renault 2.0. Lesser because I have a real soft spot for the Pro Mazda, as we know. But I'm now really coming around to the idea that I think we mentioned previously, and you just touched on before, AJ, of just retiring the cars from official racing. I'd rather race in a car that I liked on a packed grid than a car that I loved that went official, maybe, if I was lucky. I'd like to know that I can get a race regularly in the limited time that I get to race. I'm not saying delete the content, and I understand that we've all paid for these cars, but they can still be used in leagues or private sessions and maybe bench them for a season or two, then rotate them back in, giving some other cars a rest at the same time, perhaps. Maybe this would condense the drivers into a slightly smaller number of series where races go official with decent grids regularly rather than have a plethora of empty series where the cars we've bought don't get a run anyway. There's no difference between not being able to race a car because the season is being, or the category is being rested from official racing, and not being able to get a race because no one ever turns up to the races when it is live. What are your thoughts on that, AJ?
Yeah, the interesting thoughts. I definitely like the idea of rotating through different cars season after season. I mean, we sort of run that sort of rotation system with the league that you and I both run on a Friday night, where we'll pick 5 cars for 13 weeks, and after 13 weeks we'll swap them around, and that keeps things nice and fresh.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and I don't know. I mean, you're always going to upset some people. You'll never be able to keep everybody happy. Yeah, I don't know. I personally, what I'd like to see is that some of the older cars actually become free content. Like the Pro Mazda could be one,
Yep.
for example,
Yep.
especially if they're going to bring out a new one.
Yep.
Um, and then other cars like the Williams Formula One car, that would be a perfect car to have as a free car, and chuck it in as a fun series in the rookie class, and expand the free base content that iRacing has. And we've sort of seen that expansion a little bit with the new free tracks, which has been absolutely fantastic from iRacing. I have to say, it's something that, I mean, I've only been on iRacing for about 2 years now, and I haven't seen this before, and I don't know that it's really happened before. You've probably been around a little bit longer in iRacing than I have, but it's a nice initiative, and I'd just like to see that carry over on into the cars as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen a free track release before. I mean, like you, I mean, I've been around three and a bit years, I think. Great initiative. I don't know. They seem to focus a little bit on content because there's a spike in revenue, but yeah, it's a good initiative. I like your idea. Retire the Pro Mazda or make it free. Something. Just don't divide the community like that. But there were other things in the patches, of course. A bunch of new features in the beta interface. Age, have you ever used the beta interface?
No. Well, I have for about 5 minutes, but unfortunately, with the Rift, we're not able to say view the beta interface on our PC monitor and then go into a race session in the Rift. And for me, like, I like to try and keep the time that I'm actually wearing a Rift headset down to a minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't want to have that thing on my head for hours on end. So until I'm able to use my monitor for the interface and then launch the sim in the Rift, I'm not going to be using it. And I know that there's a lot of people on the forum that feel the same way, but it's just one of those things we're still waiting for.
Yeah, look, I had a poke around in it, so to speak, and I'll be honest, I feel like we're just putting lipstick on a pig in some respects. Yes, the current or the standard side is, well, old, but it's got everything you need, and it's probably representative of iRacing's roots. I mean, we've said it before. The game's over 10 years old. I mean, I saw a member on the forum the other day. He had his badge that says how long you've been on the service. It's a 10 years. I hadn't seen one of those before, but it was it was there. We all know the system's old. I just fail to see the value in the development effort put towards the new interface. That at least in my time, that interface was the genesis of the hashtag coming soon movement, So anyway, enough of that. That's my vent on it. Dynamic track changes, I thought was an interesting one. Track temps are maintained between sessions where they're adjacent, at least in sim time or time of day sort of thing within the sim. So heat in the track stays there between sessions so long as they fall in a similar time straight after one another, so to speak. They also state that you can adjust that if you're setting up a race meeting by setting the session times to be closer together or further apart if you want the track temp to be more consistent between sessions, for example. Above those tidbits, I wondered if that it meant now with the ability to set the speed of the time through the day, time passing through the day, I should say, up to 8 times, I think it is. If that commensurately affects how quickly the tracks cool down, even within a session, then I was kind of pleased to read that RSC have acknowledged that track temps will not be as consistent when you race through a 24-hour experience in 3 hours, AJ. I thought that added a little bit to the realism in some respects.
Yeah, no, that's a nice feature to see, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with the road racing, especially the 24-hour type races where Yeah, it's going to bring a heap more immersion with the whole evolution of the day and the challenge of racing over night time, and going on into the morning and then the peak of the day. But I guess that sort of stuff will really be tailored towards the oval type races, I guess,
Yeah.
with the tracks evolving so quick on oval. I think that those guys are really going to love it, and probably a good thing for them because it was perhaps a little bit light on this build for the oval guys.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought of that, but you're right on reflection. Although the one thing I'm thinking about with that changing track temps is of course the time of day might be going at 8 times, but the cars are still going around at the same real time speed. So interesting to see how that change in track dynamic temperatures will affect them. But commensurate with that was the changes in tire temperatures. Probably nothing to be too concerned about, as iRacing reports that tyres are now 50% less affected by track temperatures. It's a strange combination of changes when you think about it, but I do think for the sake of realism that the tyre changes are a good thing, at least in terms of reducing the massive difference between lap times in cold versus warm sessions, and for a more realistic driving experience. But to make the dynamic track temperature thing happen, and then to reduce the effect of track temperatures on tyres, it's a little bit odd, but I think it probably does make it a bit more realistic, AJ.
Yeah, no, that's for sure interesting. But I mean, yeah, still they're moving towards a more realistic model, and once they combine that with the what is it, V7 is the next tire model to come,
Yep.
then things will start to get really exciting, I think.
Absolutely. The big one, of course, everyone's raving about it. We had our bar humbug about it last time, AJ. Day night transitions. This new feature is now out and in the wild. From my perspective, I still feel that it will be a bit of a novelty for the most part when it comes to official racing in particular, the week to week racing, as there are so few longer races that could actually take advantage of it beyond the super enduros that we see very sporadically. Having said that, what I was really impressed with, the skies now being dynamic, the sun position changing in sessions from lap to lap with the cloud cover even moving through. In my first race after the patch was released, I was at Monza in the F3. Great combo, by the way, great fun. I loved the way that going through the first Lesmo, for example, that one lap you could see the shadows on your brake and turn in points on the left hand side of the track. The next lap you went by nothing because the clouds had moved in and blocked the sun. It's fantastic, tiny little detail change that made me smile each and every lap, AJ.
Yeah, I think that the time of day stuff, it's going to be one of those things that you're right. Or you're not going to notice it so much, but you're still going to have an appreciation of it being there. I remember when I loaded up the sim for the first time with a new build, I put my Rift headset on and I thought, oh, geez, everything looks darker than I remember. And I thought, oh, the graphics with the new build, maybe something's stuffed up or something's gone funny. But it just happened to be that there was a cloud going overhead. So I was in shadow at the time, and then the sun comes out, and it does make the sim more immersive from that sense. It just feels a little bit more alive and organic rather than what we had before. But I did have a gripe with the cloud um, quality settings where is mine defaulted to low, and it looked like my sky was moving at about 1 frame per second, and that was a real immersion killer for me. So once you set that to high, it looks a lot better again. But just I don't know how anybody would be able to race with the clouds turned right down to low and not be distracted by it because I found it really jarring and interesting that even put that option in there.
Yeah, I don't know, mate. I don't have the advantage of looking up and around like you do at the riffs. I hadn't really noticed, to be honest, with the fixed view. So, but certainly something for the Rift guys to take into account. The other thing I noticed with those changes in lights, I don't know if they changed something. I couldn't pick up on anything, but I found the lighting effects on the cars and the cars themselves as a result seemed to be looking much better. I mean, it could have just been in my head, but everything was looking just a little sharper. Reflections and shadows just seeming to pop a little more. I don't know if you noticed any of that.
Yeah, I did. I have noticed that, especially with some of the screenshots that I've seen coming out as well, and not even ones that have really been done up with, Photoshop, sort of post processing, just standard ones that people are just taking a screenshot straight from the monitor. Definitely looking a lot nicer than they were pre-patch.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I thought so. Hats off to iRacing for those things. A couple other little odds and ends in the patch notes that I saw. New 3D crowds that actually face the race instead of the cameras you're watching them through if you happen to be in replay mode. Changes to make them perform better and obviously consume less of your system resources as a result. A small thing, but anything to improve performance is a good thing in my books, AJ.
Yeah, actually have to say I haven't actually noticed the crowds yet, so I'll have a look out for that in the next one. But yeah, it's certainly nice to have 3D, well, more 3D crowds. I think they are now, yeah, rather
Yeah,
than those 2D sort of cardboard cutouts that we had before.
they were the words I was thinking of. The cardboard cutouts. Yeah, much better. Although I haven't taken much notice as yet. Just stuck out to me in the notes. Force feedback. I know you're a working man now, Dr. AJ, but I noted that there were some updates to the force feedback settings to allow for better direct drive wheel support. Have you had a chance to look at any of
Ye-
those?
I haven't actually had a look at those, and for all reports, I haven't felt any difference in the force feedback. I did read the notes, and I believe it was just a few tweaks in, say, the user UI, just to sort of make things a little bit simpler when you're trying to set up the wheel, because it's a little bit, can be a little bit convoluted, as it was before. I think from memory they've put in a tick box so you can change the strength from a percentage based number to an actual Newton meter output, um, which before you had to go in and change in the INI files and things like that. So just little tweaks like that, but I'm not sure if they've actually changed too much on the back end in terms of the actual feel of the force feedback.
Yeah, okay. Some a little bit of homework for the next tech talk session, perhaps. But the other thing that I thought was interesting, they had a new anti cheat version. I've never heard of any cheating in iRacing. Is that something you've come across in your travels, AJ?
Certainly haven't experienced it firsthand.
No.
Yeah, I mean, we'd always like to blame, hacks or something rather than having poor driving. But I mean, I have heard of it though in other series. I notably remember the Formula One car. I think it was. There was some interesting things going on with the energy recovery system in that.
Oh, really?
Some yeah, somehow people had hacked that system, and there was also another way people had found to sort of make a pseudo traction control for the Formula One cars, I think, which, yeah, again, they make a massive difference to those cars. So it certainly has happened, but that was actually, I think, in the higher up, sort of more serious competition levels. So not something that I've really seen just in random official races.
I've got to say, it's never occurred to me. But there again, it's a mindset, I guess. People willing to do it, they'll find a way. But good to know that there's measures in place. But look, they were the things that stuck out to me in the patch from what I've experienced and what I've read in what was a monolithic piece of release notes. Anything else that stuck out to you, mate?
Yeah, I got to have a run on the new tracks, and I have to say that Charlotte Roval is one of my new favorite tracks. It's
Nice.
yeah, it's like a combination of the old Charlotte, but they've combined it with a street track nearly. So you're racing around there, and there's walls lining some of the corners. There's great camber changes and rises and dips. It's very. It doesn't feel like a Roval at all. I have to say I'm not a huge fan of racing on Rovals for the most part. Ones that we often run on like Daytona and Indy, they can sort of feel a little bit bland, so
Mm.
to speak. They're
Yep.
very flat and sort of, they've just chucked corners in here and there on the infield to make a track. But the new Charlotte Roval, it feels really exciting to drive, and having the last chicane before the start finish line as well, just to break up a bit of the oval section. Oh, I love that, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to pounding the curbs literally in some of the cars like the V8 supercars and that. It's going to be really good fun.
Awesome. Yeah, look, the Roval that I was probably most fond of was the New Hampshire one, if I'm not mistaken, the one that sort of spewed out into the outfield rather than doing the Roval part, the road part of it on the infield. That was always an interesting one. But yeah, looking forward to having a run on that one. And Scuba, of course, I have not run there, but again, looking forward to having a crack on that one as well. Any first impressions on that, mate?
Yeah, Tsukuba, that was a good track. I think the racing will be interesting there. Feel like it's going to be very one lane, sort of follow the leader type stuff. The hairpins are sort of constant radius hairpins, so there's really only one line through there.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so yeah, it'll be interesting. I think it will be good in the slower powered cars, lower powered cars, especially stuff like the Mazda. Skippy should be interesting,
Mm-hmm.
but can't really see it being too popular for the more powerful cars. But still, though, a good addition, especially for free base content, where it's going to be aimed at the cars like the MX-5 and Skip Barber anyway. So yeah, good fun track.
Yeah, good one. All right. That's about it for the patch stuff. A bit of tech talk. Dr. AJ, I know you've had something on your mind to discuss in the realm of iRacing associated technology. Fire away.
Yeah, some interesting developments in monitors. You've seen these new 49-inch monitors come out, Alex.
I have seen them,
And I
yes.
know, yeah, I know that you've seen it firsthand. So I was interested to get your take on that because yeah, it's an interesting toss up between something like that, triples or VR for me. Being able to have it all contained on a single wide monitor, I could see a lot of advantages to that.
Yeah, look. Aside from costs, I mean, I went out and let's call it invested in one of the Samsung 49s. I was lucky. I went out on Black Friday. They had a good deal, and interest free means not a penny spent as yet. Although there will be some payments involved in the future. Look, as it stands, VR is getting cheaper, of course. However, I'm not seeing massive jumps in the quality of the images and resolution, which was after I did a trial, I found to be the issue for me in terms of my eyes and straining my eyes. And I'm sure it's something that I would have potentially gotten used to, but it sort of put me off. The triples that I had were somewhat cumbersome and hard to manage at times to get set up, and I was never quite happy with how they sat. I took a punt in some respects on, and a big punt at that on the 49-inch Samsung. I'm wrapped. I'm completely wrapped. I in terms of the iRacing itself, first of all, I reduced my field of view by about 10 or 15, I think. So it wasn't that big a deal. Once you removed the bezel, the real estate itself, and the resolution was literally like dual monitors. So it's instead of 1920 by 1080, it's 3840 by 1080. So it's two side by side with no joins or anything. The curvature and everything gives you a little bit of benefit, like you would folding in the outside external triples. But I found it brilliant, and the picture quality. I didn't realize I had some relatively inexpensive 24s, I think, for years, and I didn't realize how much of a difference the picture quality made. I mean, I was driving up Bathurst in the last round of the season in the Skip Barbers, of course, and I was driving up and I got so distracted looking at the concrete wall on my right hand side that I ran into the concrete wall on my left hand side. I mean, it was only a practice session, so it didn't matter. But I was just looking at it was a concrete wall, AJ. It was like I could have reached out. I felt like I could touch it. The image.
Well, i-
Sorry.
yeah, if I could interject and say, a
Yeah.
tip for the week is you go where you look. So you've just demonstrated that perfectly.
Well, I went the opposite way, AJ. It's like I've been teaching my 16-year-old daughter how to drive. And the thing that I've noticed, I keep pestering her to do a head check, gently saying, hey, you just changed lanes without checking if there was a car beside you. And, the most salient example of the following the head sort of stuff is she's then gone, and looked to do the head check just to practice it as we start grabbing a bit of dirt on the outside of the road, sort of thing. What are you doing? Which is exactly what I did when I was checking out the concrete walls at Bathurst. Look, for mine, I'm completely wrapped with the purchase, unreservedly wrapped with it. Picture quality upgrade, the images on it look great. I don't know, for a while there I thought perhaps the patch had upgraded the images, or I was just sort of seeing stuff anew on this fresh monitor. Yeah, for iRacing, double thumbs up. I've always worked for the past 20 years in IT on dual monitors, sometimes three if I could manage it. And I've been streaming and racing with a 4 monitor setup for the past sort of 18 months. Now I've got essentially 3 monitors, the big 49, which is two, and the one above for the streaming. I'm still adjusting to only having 3 instead of 4 because there's some stuff I do in the broadcast where I valued the 4 monitors above 3 that I have now, but it's workable. But other than that, just again, unreserved thumbs up, mate.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. It's an interesting option for iRacing. I'd always wondered though, like it's essentially still a single, and not having the outside monitors that you'd have with a triple, whether you felt like you would lose any of that peripheral vision to the sides.
Yeah, look, I've listened and watched. Obviously, Tyson Meyer, Quirkatized on Twitch, he was on the vanguard. He's on the vanguard of a lot of technologies with his $7 million setup, right? But um, he's been, hammered with questions, or the same questions over and over again, and particularly with regards to the peripheral vision stuff. And he said, look, realistically, when he was driving, and I actually feel very similarly that I didn't really use that last little X% on the far left and right so much. I still used my look left and look right buttons a lot to get a proper view of what was either side of me. And like I said, I only adjusted my field of view by 10 or 15 degrees. It's not a great loss for me. I really haven't noticed it. I feel like I've got as much view as I was using actively before, AJ.
Yeah, well, as long as you know that I'm going to be diving down the inside of you, Griffin, that's all that matters.
Well,
Uh,
yeah. See, part of that, I've got to be honest with you. Part of, in my opinion, smart racing and racecraft and racing IQ is knowing where people are going to be, at least in part, where they're going to be looking when the move's going to be made 9 times out of 10. There's always going to be times when you get surprised, but for the most part, particularly when you're racing in a regular series where you know what the cars are going to do, a series that you race regularly at least, the more often you do, it's like muscle memory. The more you do it, the more you know what's going to happen consistently. And it's really only to catch out surprises. For me, I still use the look left and right, and I did when I had the triples, as I'm sure you turn your head, with the VR, just to see, is the guy on my inside there enough? Is there enough overlap? For me, it's usually about, is he there enough for me to compete for the corner, or do I let him have it because he's there? You know what I mean, and concede that he's won the corner. So yeah, look, for me, it's all pluses. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything, and I'm really really enjoying it.
yeah, that's a good point, and just made me think then. you've probably got natively on your monitor a wider view of the world than perhaps what I do with the rifts being limited to about 100, 110 degrees. I mean, the Rifter gives you that freedom to sort of look around and especially sense the motion of the car when it's sliding and things like that. But
Hmm.
at the same time, me looking left or right really is no different to you just hitting look left, look right, is it?
In some respects, you're right. I think the Rift has the advantage for perspective, most definitely, in the limited experience that I have in terms of seeing where your car is in relation to others and parts of the track, apexes and exits and what have you, or turning points as well. I remember reading about improving your sim racing and how it differed to real racing. And obviously, the biggest difference is you don't get the physical sense of G force and motion to help you determine when the car's sliding. And it did say that the biggest tool that you have in absence of that is your eyes, right? And seeing it rather than feeling it. Because force feedback on a wheel can only give you so much, but the eyes were the big ticket item there. And I think the Rift, in terms of that context, will always have the edge on a static field of view. But I do, for me at the moment, in terms of where the technology's at, I wouldn't trade my monitor for VR at this stage, mate.
Yeah, no, that's a fair assessment, I think. And one more point that I'd make too is, you can say that the 49-inch ultra wides are expensive. Yeah, I mean, you'd be looking at probably in the realm of 2 to 2.5 times the price of a Rift,
Yep.
I'd say, for one of the 49 inches. But at the same time, you have to also consider the graphics card and the power that you need to run something like a Rift, or
Mm.
especially if you start looking to move up to things like the new Pimax 5K and 8K headsets. If you wanted to go with that extra field of view and slightly improved clarity, you're looking at needing something like a 1080 Ti or a new RTX 2080, which are not cheap cards.
No.
I mean, yeah, here in Australia, by the time you got a something like a Pimax and a RTX 2080, you'd be looking in the realm of $2,000. So it starts to make the 49-inch look a little bit more reasonable from that sort of price point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a big price drop, and I sort of saw the front end of that on Black Friday from the Samsung panels. Kogan also do produce a Kogan brand one that you can pick up for about the $1,000 mark. Last time I checked, it is a Samsung panel rebadged. It's got a bit of firmware in it, as I understand it, that limits its functionality a bit, sort of a tier down from the premium Samsung one. But yeah, you're right. I didn't have to upgrade my graphics card or anything. It's a single output into the monitor. It just runs at that higher resolution. And like I said, instead of powering four monitors off my graphics card, I'm essentially powering two. One at obviously a much increased resolution, or the same as two. So, look, for me, it's less cables to manage and all the rest of it, which is another plus. But you're right. Cost comparison was always, the VR sets were about as expensive as three, semi decent monitors. That's changed, but then as the new gear comes out, the price then becomes, in competition again. So, yeah, look, it's an interesting space to keep an eye on. I'm certainly grinning from ear to ear when I race with it, mate, and yeah, no turning back. But, folks, that's about where we might wind up for today. Before we go, though, I wanted to give a big shout out to the Friday Night Race Club crew. You and I, AJ, we both race in FNRC, and last Saturday was the final regular season round of the 5 Friday night racing series as well as the second King of the Mountain season for the year. A great way to finish off on the Saturday night. 32 laps around Bathurst in one of my favourites, the Pro Mazda AJ. But at the end of a 6-month season that was on the Saturday nights with the Bathurst event, the King of the Mountain, 30 drivers have now qualified for the ultimate showdown, a 50-lap race in what was a randomly selected car from the cars we'd raced this season, and it turned out to be the Mustang. It is one of the cars that the guys have driven on a Saturday night, because we do race a different car each week around the mountain in that format. But the big one for the grand finale is Saturday the 15th of December, depending on when we get the podcast out. It may well be tomorrow by the time this goes to air. But the great Bernie Weemers is dusting out the RRTV commentary booth, and I'll be joining him to call this fantastic event. So for those of you who have not qualified for your spot on the grid, make sure you join us for the coverage of that race live on the RRTV YouTube channel. I'll leave a link to the channel in the description of the podcast. Bernie and I did the last one of these, and I've got to tell you, it was an absolute blast, both on track and in the booth. I really enjoyed it. It was one of my favourite broadcasts to do, and I know that everyone involved enjoyed it as well. So a big thank you also to one of my previous podcast guests in Mr. Brian Sheridan, who, along with his admin team, is the heart and soul of FNRC. Every club has a show, AJ, but he's certainly a man among men. And thank you also to the sponsors of the Friday Night Race Club in Central Coast Subaru, and now Subaru Australia's come on board to provide some fantastic prizes for the big race. It's great to have the likes of Subaru supporting grassroots sim racing like this, AJ. It's really giving to a group that engages car and sim racing enthusiasts and enables us to enhance and enjoy this thing we all enjoy so much, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great to see FNRC grow over well, I'm not sure how long I've been involved with it now, but certainly it's just going from strength to strength, and as you say, it's great having Subaru Australia on board now, along with Central Coast Subaru, and not just for the drivers, but especially if we can get more of these sorts of broadcasts going as well, and try and push it out to the wider community, and showcase how competitive and fun that sim racing can be. And I'm really looking forward to Saturday, and hoping it's a good show for you and all of the viewers, Alex.
I'm sure it will be, mate. So, yeah, check out all the action on track or on the RRTV broadcast, as I said. Of course, the new official iRacing season has started once again, AJ, and that means one thing. Monday Night Lights is about to kick off once again. Coming up this time, season 15, if you can believe it, AJ.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. It will be my first full season calling, so that's something to look forward to. And we get to start off at Lime Rock Park, is that right? So, what's that, like a million laps round and around Lime Rock Park? It seems, but should make for some interesting racing.
Yeah, it's about 20, I think, just shy of a million. But look, that was the first track that I did a call for, actually, when I started with RRTV, when Bernie got back involved in the series. So a lot of fun there. I can still remember the race pretty clearly. And I'm really proud to say that with the support of the MNL community of drivers, that the 9:15 p.m. race on a Monday night Australian time was the strongest average field of drivers for the whole season just gone. So that's right. Out of all the time slots each week for the hourly Skippy races, our event drew out the strongest fields each and every week across the entire season. It's an amazing amazing result, I should say, and certainly brings me personally great satisfaction in so much as we've built something that the community is supporting and embracing. They're also taking advantage, it has to be said, of high quality racing and really big points on offer for the official season, and also, of course, for the iRating that goes along with it. But what we do see as a result is great on track action to go with a great bunch of regular folks who have helped us to build this great little community. A lot of greats in there, but thank you to all the drivers who come out each week, as well as those who join us and support us on YouTube, where we broadcast the races live on the Top Split YouTube channel, of course, which is where we'll be again this upcoming Monday night for the opening to season 15, AJ.
Yeah, exciting. And, just echoing back with the highest strength of field of the week, I think I've said it on more than one occasion, looking back, reflecting after races, how did they not make contact? And it just, it goes to show the quality of the drivers in there. And if you can get to that time slot, just make sure you get in there, because the more people you get, the tighter the competition, the tighter the racing is going to be. So that's what we want, and I hope that it just continues to go from strength to strength.
Yeah, absolutely. Showcases a great category in iRacing and the great bunch of people that enjoy it. So, apart from the M&L broadcast, Dr. AJ, where can the folks find you?
Yeah, look out for me, AJ_77 on Twitch TV. Most likely, probably be doing the Saturday night race around Bathurst. So I'll try and get a stream up for that one, and see if we can't bring home a podium.
Perfect. As for me, Top Split TV is where I'll be racing when I'm not doing the M&L broadcasts or here to doing the podcast. That's on Twitch, of course, and you and I will both be doing the new Oceanic Sim Racing Formula 3 Championship on Thursday nights. I think that starts, well, tomorrow as we're talking now, but, it'll be beyond us or behind us once this comes out, so it's all very confusing. So I don't know about you, AJ, but I plan to stream those live races. I expect it to be interesting, to say the least. I mean, it could go well, it could be short run thing with some officials after. I don't know, mate. Interesting to see how the new car plays out in that one.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I don't know if I'd be game to stream that one. It'll probably just be streaming my own death. I still haven't come to grips with that car, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we go on Thursday night.
Yeah, that one's at Montreal. They're not terrible around there, so yeah, it could be interesting. But of course, you and I'll be teaming up for the Top Split Racing team, which will be great fun. Always enjoyable when you throw in a team element to racing, whether it be in endurance events or like here, just vying for a team championship in amongst an overall series. So really looking forward to that one. But for now, folks, once again, I'll leave the links to the places where you can find us in the description of the podcast. So please reach out and get in touch. Hit us up live on our respective streams or on the Top Split Facebook page. Shout out to Matt Kidd, who hit me up on Facebook and is now running the Top Split on his car liveries this season. Great to see some support for us out in the community, and I must say his cars look great. So make sure you hit us up on Facebook or in the Top Split Discord server, where we've had some great discussions going around the new cars, setups and the like. Really good times. But for now, and until next time, on behalf of my co-host, Dr. Alex John, I've been your host, Alex McKellar, and you've been listening to the Top Split. Ciao for now.